Hello everyone! Today we will finally connect an SQLite database to a Flask application. And not only this, but we will also see how to use JavaScript interactions, which will take our app making skills to the next level. So on today's menu, we have a Groceries app which loads 5 random products from a database into a shopping list. We can then add new products, we can remove products, so it's a very useful and fully functional application. And by the end of this tutorial, you will know exactly how to build it on your own. Now, another cool thing, which will probably blow your mind, is that this application will be deployed and hosted directly by our IDE, without using Heroku, because we don't really need it anymore if we are using Wayscript. So are you ready? Let's roll. And this time, we will begin with some starter files, which you can either clone or copy from the description. And all we have here is a grocery list database, which I've created in advance. We also have the Python file I've used to create this database. You can make any type of changes you'd like. And if you're not sure how to make these changes, definitely check out my previous SQLite tutorial where I explain SQLite in great detail. And the last file we have here would be app.py, which includes all the routes, all the requests, and basically all the logic behind our application. And before we begin, let's quickly go over these commands. So right at the top, we have our imports. Underneath, we initialize a class for our application and we call it app. Right below, we define a secret key for our application, and this key will be used to encrypt our cookies. So make sure you change this string into something way less readable. For example, this would be a good secret key. So yeah, don't take me as an example here, and don't share your secret key with anybody. So right below, we define the main route of our application with an index function that, at least at this point of time, only returns some placeholder text. And then right below, we have our get database function, which is basically connecting our SQLite database to our application. And then these blocks of code, they are responsible for terminating our database connection once we are done using it. And then lastly, if name equals main, then our app will run. Cool. Now let's start coding. And we will begin by fetching all the groceries from our database and printing them to the page. And we can already see that inside our get database function, we have already established a connection with our database, and we call this connection DB. Cool. Now let's create a cursor object with cursor equals db.cursor. And we can then use this cursor object to execute SQL commands. So right underneath, we will type cursor.execute. And inside the round brackets, we will pass an SQL command of select all from groceries, which is the name of our table inside the grocery list database. And then instead of returning our database connection, we will return cursor.fetch all, which represents the result of our execute command. Cool. And then right above inside our index function, we will type data equals get underscore database, which will call our get database function. And we will then, instead of returning this placeholder text, we will return the string instance of data. Oh, and of course I had a typo here. So instead of cursor, we will type cursor. Now, if you're running Flask locally on your computer, I'm including all the instructions and all the commands you need in the description. And it's both for Windows and both for Linux machines. Or alternatively, you can always check out my previous Flask tutorial where I explain and demonstrate everything in great detail. This tutorial is more of a fast track situation. However, if you're using Wayscript just like I do, today you are in for a treat. So let's go ahead and deploy our application to a development environment. We can do this by pressing on triggers. Then we will press on new trigger, and we will select the deploy trigger. Then inside the command to run field, we will type flask run -- port, which in my case would be 8083, and the host would be 0.0.0.0, 4 zeros. And then we will specify our port number once again in the port field. So we will type 8083. Cool. Now Let's go ahead and press on run. And once we are done, we will simply press on this endpoint link. And awesome! It looks like we are successfully connecting to the database because we can see both the ID field and both the name field of each of our database entries. Now, since we are not really interested in the ID field of our data, we will only select the name column from our database table, and we will also take this cursor fetch all command, we will cut it, and we will assign it to its very own variable, which we will call all_data, without the typo, of course. And we will also need to make a few changes to this data, because if you guys remember, we are receiving our database entries as tuples, while we are actually interested only in the string that hides inside this tuple. So let's go ahead and dispose of the tuple and only keep the string. And we will do this with a simple list comprehension where we keep value in the index of 0 for value in all data. So instead of keeping the entire tuple, we are only focusing on the string that lives inside this tuple. We will then reassign this expression back to all data. And if we're already here, let's also convert it into a string. So we will add the str function to our value at the index of 0. And lastly, we will return all data because we need to return something, obviously. And then at the top of our code, instead of returning the string instance of data in our main route, we will return data in the index of 0. And it's safe to do so because we know for a fact that this is a string. We just converted it into one. I just really want to see how a single data entry looks like before we start targeting it. So let's go ahead and save this file. Let's go ahead and redeploy it. So back in triggers, we will press on run. Beautiful, it's apples. That's exactly what we've expected. And there are no annoying round brackets around it. Everything is perfect. Now let's go ahead and start working on our HTML. So inside our root directory, we will create a brand new folder called templates. And inside this folder, we will create a new file called index.html. And first things first, let's set the document type. So in our case, our doc type is HTML, of course, because this is an HTML file. We will then open an HTML tag, and in between, we will place a head tag. Now the head tag is where we store the title of our page. So let's set it to grocery list. And then right below our closing head tag, we will create the body of our application. Inside the body tag, of course. And for now, the only thing I want to do is I want to make sure that our database connects to our HTML file as well, not just to our app.py file. So let's create some placeholders for all our items using Jinja, which is the official templating engine of Flask. So let's go ahead and open a set of curly brackets along with a set of percentage symbols. And then in between, we will type for item in all_data. And then inside, we will create a paragraph element and we will place item as text inside it. So instead of just specifying item, we specify item in a set of curly brackets. And this is the basic syntax of Jinja. So right in the line below, we can end this for loop by opening another set of curly brackets, another set of percentage symbols, and typing end for. So let's go ahead and save this file, and we will make sure we are rendering it inside app.py. So instead of returning data in the index of 0, we will type render_template. And then inside the round brackets, we will specify index.html. And then as a second argument, we will create a variable called allData, which we will assign to data, our get database return statement. And the reason why we called our variable allData is because inside our HTML file, we have also specified allData. So this variable name must match the variable name we give to app.py. And now if we save this file and we rerun our trigger, we are now accessing our database from the HTML template as well. Now let's go ahead and store these items as form options rather than paragraphs. To do this, we will create a container to our form, which in our case is a div element with the ID of add item. And then in between this container, we will place our form with the action of add underscore items, which is very important to remember because this would be the name of the route this form leads to, okay? And then additionally, we will also specify the method, which in our case would be post. It's either post or get. We will then close this form tag, and inside it, we will begin with a select element. So we will type select. We will give it the name of select items because we will use it for later. And then the syntax for each of our options goes as follows. We type option with the value of apple or apples, for example. And in between the opening and closing tags, we will also specify the name of our option, which is apple, apples. And this will repeat across all our entries. So let's go ahead and copy, actually cut this Jinja syntax from below. We will paste it right underneath our select command. And then, instead of the paragraph we had there earlier, we will paste our option tag. And everywhere we see the word apple, we will paste item. And we can now get rid of this item paragraph from earlier. Let's make sure everything is nice and neat. And now the only thing our form is missing is a submit button. So let's go ahead and add it. In the end of our for loop, we will type input with the type of submit with the value of add item in capital case. And that's pretty much it. Our form is complete if I didn't have any typos here. Let's save this file and let's move on with app.py. And as you may guess, we will need a brand new route for our form. To do this, we will copy this route syntax and we will revise slash to slash add underscore items, which must be 100% match to the action we gave to our HTML form. So if we go back, we see that our action is add items, and the exact same name should be given to our route method. Now, as a second argument, we will specify methods equals post. Only post in our case, we don't need get. And let's create a function to this route. So we will call it add items as well. And at least at first, we only wanted to return request.form in the key of. This has to match the name of our select tag, which in our case would be select items. Let's go ahead and copy it and paste it inside our add items route. And then once we do this, we can now save our file. We can then go ahead and rerun our triggers. And perfect. Instead of a bunch of paragraphs, we are now getting a form with some select options. And if we choose an option, let's say we'd like some cake, it's tasty, we'll press on add item, and there you go. We have a brand new route opening up where we see cake, which is given to us by request.form in the key of select items. But there's just one more form we need to take care of, and this one deals with checkmark elements. So at first, we would like to randomly select 5 items from our database and present them to the user as a shopping list. So let's go ahead and take care of that. And first, we will make a distinction between all the data and the shopping list data, which only consists of 5 items. And since these two are completely different entities, it makes a lot of sense to separate them. So we will begin with a copy of all data, which we can get with shopping underscore list equals all data dot copy. And then we would like to mix up the order of all the items in our list. We can do this with a random shuffle. So we will type random.shuffle, and inside the round brackets, we will pass shopping list. And lastly, we are only looking for 5 shopping list items. That's why we will slice off everything else. So we will type shopping list equals shopping list in the index of all the items up until index number 5. So we will only select all the items from index 0 up until index 4, which gives us 5 of them. Cool. Now let's update our return statement. We will copy our shopping list and we will add it to our all data. So now we are returning a tuple instead of a list. And as you may guess, we will need to update it in our get database call. So instead of unpacking it to data only, we will unpack it to all underscore items and shopping underscore items. We will then, of course, update our render template function. So instead of all data equals data, we will type all items equals all items. Let's keep it consistent, and we will soon update it inside our index HTML file as well. And then we will copy the shopping items variable, and we will type shopping items equals shopping items. Then back inside our HTML file, instead of all data, we will type all items. And now we can create a brand new form for our shopping list. So we will once again begin with a container, which is a div element with the ID of remove items. Now inside this div container, we will create a form with the action of /remove items, which is a brand new route we will add to our app.py file after. And we will also add a method of post once again. And then inside this form, we can create our check mark elements as well as their labels. And to do this, we will use a for loop once again. So we will open a set of curly brackets with a set of percentage symbols, and we will type for item in shopping items, which is our second variable name from app.py shopping items. There you go. So back inside our Jinja for loop, we will create an input element with the type of checkbox, with the name of check, with the ID of item, as well as the value of item. And we will also need a label for this checkbox, so let's create a label element for item, and this has to match the ID of our checkbox of our input itself. We will also give this label the name of item, and we will also add the inner HTML text of item. And then just in case, let's add a line break, which is a BR element, as in break, and only now we can end this for loop. So let's go ahead and do that. So end for, without any spaces. Cool. And right underneath, we can then create our submit button with input in the type of submit, in the value of remove items, actually in all caps. Cool, I think we're done. Let's save everything and let's rerun our trigger. We are now displaying all our shopping list items on the page. And if we refresh this page, we are getting a brand new list of items in return, which is perfect. We wanted to have some randomness in here. And there's just one more issue. If we are now selecting an item, let's say cake, and we want to add it, by pressing on the Add Item button, we would like to push it into our shopping list. But if we take a look inside our app.py file, our shopping list lives inside the index function. It is a local variable there, so our Add Items function has no access to it. So how can we push an item into a list that we have no access to? We simply use something called sessions. Now, sessions in Flask allow us to share data between different functions. So instead of working on a local scope, we are working on a global scope. So let's do the following. Whenever we are unpacking our getDatabase function, instead of unpacking it into local variables, let's unpack it into session variables. To do this, we will type session, and we will wrap all items inside a set of square brackets as a string. So it's sort of a key. We will do the same to our shopping items. So session, a set of square brackets, a set of quotes, and there you go. We are now loading our variables globally. So let's update it inside our render template function. So all items equals session all items, and shopping items equals session shopping items. Perfect. And only now we can append our new item into our shopping list. So we will type session in the key of shopping items dot append, and we will append our request.form in the key of select items, and we will then copy this render template command and we will paste it in our add items route as well. Now, in order to make sessions work, we also need to specify some methods in our main route. So let's add methods, and we will go for both post and get. Now, if you're running Flask locally, you can just save this file and skip the next command. But if you're using Wayscript, we have an additional step of setting a session cookie name. Now, this is just a temporary walkaround because they're working on fixing it as we speak. I double checked. So in the meanwhile, we will just type app.config as in configuration, and inside a set of square brackets, we will specify session underscore cookie underscore name in all caps, and we will assign it to some kind of a super secret, super random password. In my case, my cookie monster 528. I don't know. I'm sharing this publicly anyway, so it doesn't really matter what I pick. It's not going to be a secret. And then once we do this, we can save the file, we can rerun the trigger and have a look. So let's see if it worked. So we will select an option. Let's go for cake. And awesome, cake is being added to our shopping list. But the real test is to add another option and make sure that it's not replacing cake, but it's being added on top of cake. So let's press on add item. And awesome, we are both adding cake and lentils. Good job, you guys. Now let's move on with the remove items form. To do this, we will need to create a new route. So let's just copy our add items one, and we will change add items to remove items. Then right underneath, we will define a new function, also called remove items. And the first thing we want to do is we want to select all the active checkbox input elements from our HTML page. So we will type request.form.getList. And inside these round brackets, we will specify the name of our checkbox input elements. So we'll go back to our HTML page. There you go, that's our input with the type of checkbox, and its name is check. So let's copy check, and let's paste it inside get list. Cool, we can now assign this expression to checked boxes. And once we have selected all our checked boxes, we can then go ahead and remove them. So right below, we will type for item in checked boxes. And this is more of a precaution step, but we will also add a conditional statement where if item in session in the key of shopping items, only then we will remove this item. And we will do this by popping it from our shopping list. Now, in order to use pop, we need to find out the index of our item inside the shopping list. We can do this by typing session. Actually, I'm going to copy this. Session in the key of shopping items dot index. And inside the round brackets, we specify our item because that's the index we want to get. We can assign this expression to IDX. And in the next line of code, we will simply type session in the key of shopping items dot pop, and inside the round brackets, IDX. And we will of course need to update our session. We will type session dot modified equals true. And now the only thing left to do is to copy our render template command and to paste it inside the remove items route as well. So now let's save this file and let's rerun our triggers. And let's try to remove some items. Now I'm not a big fan of rosemary, so this goes first. Awesome, rosemary is gone. Now let's select a bunch of them and see if we can remove them at once. Perfect, so we can select multiple items and we can remove them at the same go. Now let's see if it affected our add items functionality. No, it didn't affect it. Perfect. So it looks like our application is fully functional. And now we just need to make it pretty. Now the first step for a pretty application is adding a logo. And we can do this inside a special div container. So opening and closing tags, and in between them our image. Now, in my case, I'm going to use a logo I've designed in advance, and I've hosted it on my GitHub account, so you guys can copy it. I'm including the link in the description, and we will then paste this URL inside an SRC attribute. In addition, we will also add an alt attribute, which is relevant for those that cannot view the image. So for example, you may have a slow internet connection, or maybe you're using screen readers, and if that's your case, we would like to have a description of the image for you to view. That's why we will type grocery app logo. And this is the alternative text in case you cannot see the image. Cool. And now we can go ahead and style our application with the help of CSS. To do this, we will create a brand new folder inside our root directory, and we will call it static. Inside static, we will create a new folder once again, but this time we will call it CSS. And then inside the CSS folder, we will create a new file called main.css. Now, in order to use this file, we need to connect it to our HTML first. So inside the head tag, we will type link rel equals style sheet, which is the kind of file we are linking. And we will also add an href attribute, which is pretty much the URL of the file we are looking to link. Now, in the case of Flask, we specify it with a double set of curly brackets. Inside them, we type URL_for. We open a set of round brackets, and we specify the folder first, which in our case would be static. So let's type static. Then we specify the file name, and we set it to CSS, which is our folder name, /main.css, which is the file name. Now let's make sure we have a closing tag here. Perfect. Now it looks good. Actually, almost. Of course, I have a typo here. So URL for. Perfect. Now it officially looks good. Let's save it and let's go back to our main CSS file. And the first thing we'll do is style our logo. So let's select it with image. And we will then set the width of this image to 400 pixels and set some padding, which is the spacing inside the element, while margin is the spacing outside the element. And we will set it to 20 pixels, at least at first. Let's see how it looks like. And another thing I'd like to do is I want some general styling to my page. That's why I will select the body tag, and I will set the font family to Railway, as usual. And I will also set the font size to 1.5 M, which I believe equals 24 pixels, I hope. And then lastly, we will set the text alignment, text align to center, because we don't want our elements to be at the far left. We want them to be at the center of the page. Cool. Now let's save this file. Let's rerun our trigger and let's see if it worked. And yay, it worked. Now let's keep on styling. And the first thing I want to do is I want to add some margin around our shopping list labels. So let's select our labels with label, and we will set their margin to 25 pixels for the top and bottom, as well as 5 pixels for the left and right. And if we're already here, let's also style our entire shopping list. And if I'm not mistaken, we called it remove items. Let's quickly double check that. So back inside index.html, yeah, the div container of our remove items form has the ID of remove items. And that's exactly what we're targeting inside our CSS. So whenever you see this hashtag, we are selecting an ID, okay? So let's style our remove items div. We will set the background color to a light gray. In my case, I'll go for E5, 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 easy to remember. And then in the next line, we will set the text color. Now in my case, we will set color to, actually I want some dark gray, so 302 B29. I think it's going to be a nice one. And then lastly, let's add some padding. So padding, I will go for 30 pixels all the way around. Let's save everything and let's rerun it. And by the way, whenever you refresh this page, make sure you are pressing on Ctrl at the same time, because this will refresh the cache of your page. And if you don't do this, you might not see the changes you've made in CSS. Now, in general, I'm very happy with this design, but the only thing I'm not happy with are those buttons. They have to be prettier. So let's take care of that. Now, in order to easily select those buttons, we will add them an ID attribute. Now, in the case of the remove button, we will call it remove btn. We will then copy this entire expression and we will paste it inside our other submit button. This time, instead of remove button, we will call it add button. We'll save it, and then back inside main.css, we will target these buttons. So we will begin with the add button, and we will set the background color to a nice green, which I've selected in advance. So that would be 01A, 88A. This one I memorized. Cool, and then we will add a text color with color, and we will set it to white. Now we would also like to have a bold font, so we will type font, weight, and we will go for bold. Then let's add some rounded corners to this button with border, radius, and we will set it to 20 pixels. We will then set the border itself. So border would be 2 pixels, solid. Let's go for white. We will add some margin, which is spacing around the element. I will set it to 10 pixels. We will also add some padding, which is the spacing inside the element. So it's everywhere between the text itself and the edge of the button. And we would like to set it a padding of 10 pixels for the top and bottom and 15 pixels for the left and right. And then lastly, whenever we are hovering above this button, we would like our cursor to change to a pointer. That's why we will type cursor, pointer. And I believe that's it for the add button. Now let's copy this entire block of code and we will slightly adjust it for our remove button. So let's change add to remove. And actually, let's do something a bit more interactive. So I want this button to look clickable only after we made a selection. So up until the point where at least one checkbox is checked, this button needs to look disabled. That's why we will get rid of this cursor pointer. We will set the background color to some kind of a light gray. Actually, let's go for light gray. And then the text, because of the background color, would be black instead of white. And everything else is fine. Let's save it. Let's have a look. And actually, before we do so, let's change remove items to check items, at least at first. And then once we make a selection, we will then adjust it to remove items. Okay, let's save everything. And now let's rerun our triggers. And awesome, our submit buttons look much, much better now. But the only thing we're left with would be our select options. We can make it prettier. And also, I want to add a hover event above our add items button. So let's do that. So let's select our select tag and we will set its font family to Railway. We will also set the font size to 0.85 em, which is smaller. We will also set the text alignment to center. Cool. In addition, we would like to add a width to our select box, which in our case would be 200 pixels. We will also add some margin. Let's give it a 50 pixels margin for the top and bottom. We want a big gap. And we will also add a 15 pixel margin for the left and right. Actually, let's make it 10. We'll also add some padding, which in our case would be 5 pixels for the top and bottom and 0 pixels for the left and right. And then lastly, we will add a border styling, which in our case would be 2 pixels, solid. And let's go for dark gray. Cool. I think we're done with this select tag. And last but not least, we would like to add a hover event above our add button. So we will type add btn at hover, and we will set its background color to dark slate gray, which is a very nice dark greenish color. Let's save everything and let's rerun it. Perfect. Our select options look amazing, and we also have a hover event above our add item button. Now, realistically, the only thing left to do is client-side interactions. And for this, we will need JavaScript. To combine some JavaScript inside our Flask application, we will create a brand new folder inside static. We will call it JS, and we will create a new file inside it called main.js. Now let's go ahead and connect this file to our index.html. So right inside our head tag, we will add a script tag with the type of text/JavaScript. And then the src attribute will look very similar to the href attribute from above. So let's just go ahead and copy it. And we will adjust the file name to js/main.js. We will also need to add a closing tag. And that's it. We can now use JavaScript to interact with the page elements. And the first thing we will do is we will add a callback function to our checkbox elements. So we will scroll below, and right in the end of our checkbox input, we will add onChange, which will trigger a callback function each time we check or uncheck an element. We will select a name to this function. I'm going to call it checkMe. And we will pass our item into this function, because this will indicate what kind of element we are interacting with. Okay, cool. Let's save this file and let's move back to our main.js file. And we will begin by defining our checkMe function. Of course, we will type function checkMe, And since this function receives some input, we will create a parameter inside called input ID. And it kind of makes sense because back in our index.html document, we see that the input with the type of checkbox has the ID of item. We then go ahead and pass the ID of item into our checkme function. So the input to our checkme function is a perfect match to the ID of input. Therefore the name. It was a long explanation to a short problem. So let's open a set of curly brackets and we will pass the instructions to our function inside. And let's begin by selecting our checkbox input. We will do this with document.query selector in camel case. And inside the round brackets, we will specify the exact element we would like to target. In our case, that would be an input field with the ID of input ID, which we will simply concatenate here. So plus input ID. And we will also need to close the square bracket we opened earlier, as well as adding a semicolon to the end of this expression because that's just JavaScript. We can then assign this expression to a variable var called checked input. And we will do something very similar to our labels. So we will just copy this entire line of code. We'll adjust it below. So we will switch input to label. And we will adjust to a label field with the name of input ID. Because if you guys remember, back in our HTML document, we see that the name attribute of our labels equals to item, which equals input ID. Cool. Now let's go ahead and make some changes to these items. If checked input dot checked, we will then set a text decoration to our checked label. To do this, we will type checked label dot style dot text decoration in camel case, and we will set it to line through. Otherwise, we will create an else clause where we will copy this line of code from above, and we will then set the text decoration to an empty string, so that if we change our mind and we decide to uncheck this element, the text decoration will also disappear. Now let's go ahead and take care of our button. So we will first select it with document, this time get element by ID, to which we will pass the ID of remove btn, our remove button. We will then assign this expression to a variable name called btn. And of course, I forgot the semicolon, so let's just add it. And we can now go ahead and style our button. So first we will type btn.value, and we will set the inner text of our button to remove items. Then we will set the font color with btn.style.color, and we will set it to white. So hashtag FFFFFF, I hope. And then in the next line of code, we will type btn.style.background color, which in my case, I want to go for some kind of a nice red color, which I prepared in advance. So we will set it to hashtag FE7575. Cool. And the last thing we'll do here is we will set the cursor to a pointer. So we will type btn.style.cursor equals pointer. And there you go. I believe we are done. Let's save this file and let's rerun it. Yeah, and make sure we have an onChange attribute and not an onChage, which I had earlier. Okay? Now that we fixed it, we can move on. Now let's test our application for the very last time. And we will begin by selecting an item from the list. This is a very good indication, but let's select a few more items. And let's unselect one item. Perfect. So our text decoration logic works amazingly. But how about our remove items logic? Let's press on it. Awesome. And not only our items are gone, but our button is back to check items and there is no special pointer cursor above it. Awesome. Now let's add some items. Let's go for cilantro. Let's go for chicken. And now let's remove them. Perfect. So our application is fully functional. It is beautiful and good job for making it this far. Now let's go ahead and deploy this application to production. And before we can do this, we need to generate a requirements file. So inside our terminal, we will type pip freeze greater than requirements.txt. We will run it and let's have a look in our new file. Perfect. So it includes all the dependencies of our application. We have Flask, we have Jinja, and so on. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but let's use our IDE to deploy our application to production. So we will navigate to this deploy icon, we will press on deploy, we will confirm it, and we will save whichever files we forgot to save. We will then navigate to this endpoints section. We will make our endpoints publicly accessible. We will then copy this URL and we will paste it in a brand new tab. And congratulations, our application is complete, it's deployed, and it's amazing. And the best test is actually to check in a browser where I am not logged in to my Wayscript account. So let's go ahead and open Firefox, paste our URL here, let's run it, and we can access our application from any browser, regardless of having a Wayscript account or not. Now, let's check if it works. Let's select an item, let's remove it, let's add an item. Hallelujah! And today, I actually have a challenge for you guys. Now, this application is really nice, but it is not perfect. I want you guys to find the flaws of this application, and I want you to fix them. Let me know in the comments below what was the problem and what was your solution. I would love to hear it. Now, thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful. And if you did, please share it with the world. Tell it to everybody. If you like this video, please leave it a like. If you have anything to say, please leave me a comment. If you'd like to see more tutorials of that kind, please subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell. I'll see you guys very soon in a brand new tutorial, so don't go anywhere. Stay here.